Can the federal government cut its way to national prosperity? GOP presidential candidate Ron Paul wants to give it a whack. I'm PJTV's Scott Ott, today live from Washington, D.C., where the prices are high, but the teleprompter is low. And with me to examine Ron Paul's plan to restore America, from Monument, Colorado, Stephen Green, and from Los Angeles, California, Bill Whittle. Well, Congressman Ron Paul's four-year budget projection eliminates 5 cabinet-level departments, rolls back spending elsewhere to 2006 levels, cuts the federal workforce 10%, eliminates foreign aid and foreign wars, corporate subsidies, and the TSA, and block grants greatly reduce Medicaid, S-CHIP, and food stamp dollars to the states so that they can do with them as they please. His corporate tax rate drops to 15%, and he abolishes taxes on repatriated foreign profits. The death tax gone, taxes on personal savings gone. Plus, he extends all the Bush-era tax cuts. When it's all done, the government has a modest surplus in year 3, but the national debt continues to grow, at least in real dollars, past $16.5 trillion. Here's Representative Paul talking about the so-called draconian cuts in his plan.
I just used a perfect example. By draconian cuts after World War II, it stimulated the economy because the resources aren't diminished. The resources are put back into the economy, and the people spend the money. But now all we do is give them debt. We tax, we borrow, and then we inflate, and then we distort the economy, so we destroy the production because the government takes over the economy, and that's the negative.
Now, Steve Green, if Herman Cain's 999 plan got attacked because Congress would never pass it, what chance does President Paul have of getting Capitol Hill to swallow this bitter pill? And frankly, how will Congress ever see cutting federal spending as actually pumping money back into a sagging economy like Paul does?
Well, I'm not sure it matters, at least not the first part of your question, because the thing about free markets is, in the end, they always get their say. They always get their way. They always get their revenge on intervention. Always. It's just a matter of time. So the question isn't, will we ever cut Washington back down to size? The question is, will we cut spending in an orderly, lawful way, or will the whole thing come crashing down and take all of us with it? Now, Ron Paul, he's the only candidate who's honest about what's coming, and that's what I like about him. But do you remember Cassandra? She didn't get tossed out on her bottom for predicting the future. She got tossed out for being right. Paul is right about the economy. He's right about taxes, but it's also what makes him unelectable this year. It's sad, but it's true.
Remember, PJTV commenters, it was Steve Green who said that Ron Paul is unelectable. Bill Whittle, even with President Paul's long list of cuts, spending continues to grow from the new 2006 baseline, and the national debt continues to grow, at least in real dollars. What does that tell you about this federal budget?
Well, it's a tumor, Scotty. It's a tumor that keeps growing, and it's killing the country. It's killing the patient. But, you know, I'm very interested in messaging and subtext and so on. And you said, would Congress or the American people swallow this bitter pill? It's not a bitter pill. It's a sugar pill. And what we need to do is we need to understand 3 fundamental things. First of all, that wealth can be generated out of thin air, through creativity, through complexity, and through trade. Secondly, we need to understand that the government does not create any wealth at all. All the government does is take from the wealth producers and redistribute it or use it for legitimate purposes. And thirdly, we need to understand that up until very recently, the Constitution and the respect for the rule of law limited how much of this prosperity the government could take away from the productive sector. Now, what Ron Paul is basically saying here is a plan that recognizes all 3 of these things. Wealth can be created. The wealth generators, if given a reasonable tax code, will generate more wealth than the society ever needs. And the government needs to get back behind the firewall of limited powers so that this miracle can continue.
You're right, and he does project growing GDP, which will make the national debt actually a smaller percentage of GDP. So even though in real dollars it goes up, in the percentages it goes down. Steve, if you were one of the more mainstream establishment presidential candidates, which aspects of Ron Paul's plan would you try to adopt? And since he's not running for Congress again, if you beat him out for the GOP nomination, would you have a place in your administration for him?
Oh yeah, I make him Secretary of the Treasury and let him run roughshod over Ben Bernanke. That'd be happy. That'd be a really happy thing.
Yeah.
But for his program, I take all but 2 parts. I'd have to toss out his foreign policy. You know, it sounds great to go back to the way we did things in 1783, but It's just not possible for a maritime global trading nation not to have powerful armed forces, especially a Navy and a Marine Corps, where you know what, someone is going to take your trade away from you. And somebody has to protect the sea lanes. The Brits used to do it, now it's our job. You want the Chinese doing that in the future? I don't think so. Paul's policy would be the ruin of our economy and the global economy. But the other thing would be going back to the gold standard. Again, great in theory, but nobody has yet come up with a practical way to put that genie back in the bottle, as much as I wish we could. And it makes Paul sound a little nutty when he brings it up every time he talks. Everything else, though, I'm on board with.
Stephen Green hosts Hair of the Dog, the Weekend Blog's Coast to Coast Tea Party, here on PJTV.com. Well, Bill, cutting education and housing budgets and slashing spending for food stamps and Medicaid and child nutrition will all be portrayed as cruelty to the needy. How can Ron Paul make the case that the federal budget is not a measure of our collective compassion as a nation?
Well, first of all, you got to get behind a series of charities and social support networks and churches and families and so on. The big problem we have, Scotty, is that the progressives had destroyed the family before they destroyed the society. The reason people are dependent on the government now so much is because the family's been utterly destroyed. We've always had people who had a hard time taking care of themselves, people who've been legitimately disabled, or people who are just down on their luck. And traditionally, families have taken care of that. And as families got weaker, the government had to get stronger to fill in. So we've got a huge problem here. But what we need to constantly come back to is this idea that dependency on the government is a food pellet that limits your future to nothing. Your future consists of living long enough to get your next food pellet. There's a better way to live than that. And that's why we have to stop making these negative things and start making them positive things.
Bill Whittle co-founded DeclarationEntertainment.com. He hosts Afterburner and co-hosts Claven Whittle and You right here on PJTV.com. Well, the shocking thing about Ron Paul's plan is not its elimination of 5 cabinet-level departments or massive military cuts or rolling back spending to 2006 levels. No, the real shocker is that after making all of those so-called draconian cuts, it results in a higher national debt than we have now. Though, as I said, it is a bit smaller as a percentage of GDP. Folks, we face a long, hard battle. And here's hoping that the Ron Paul plan gets a full, fair hearing and vigorous scrutiny. You know, it's time for an election cycle that emphasizes substance over style, just for once. For Bill Whittle, Stephen Green, and the entire trifecta crew at PJTV, from our nation's capital, I'm Scott Ott.